Hi. I've had a lot of clients lately talk to me about using service principals in flows. And what are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? One of the biggest things that comes up is after I use a service principal to own and kick off a flow, what about things like SharePoint? I still need, if I'm going to use the SharePoint connector, the native connector, I'm still going to need to use a user or something. A service principal can't own that kind of connector. So what do we do? So what we're going to go through here today is how to use a service principal and the Graph API to call SharePoint. Now, a word of warning. The SharePoint connector is free. You can use that with any type of power license. However, if you are using the Graph API, you're going to use either custom connector or an HTTP call, and that is premium. So you will kick your flow that was free into the premium level. So make sure you understand that and that it's worth it for you before you move forward. The first thing we have to consider is where are we going to do our API connection? Now, there are three different ways that we can actually connect up into our Graph API. We can use an API management program such as Azure Web, Azure API Management, or we can do a custom connector, or we can just do a direct HTTP call from the application itself. With Azure API Management, this is a native connector that you are going to use. There is one interface for all APIs. So you only call this one environment. It doesn't make any difference if you're doing it from your Power Platform environment 1, 2, or 3. It all calls in the same management. There is a common authentication. It uses Entra ID, and what you're going to do there is you will configure it for the various people that have rights to this particular API. You do need to take this into consideration because when you are using the Graph API and you're using a service principal, you're going to strip some of that security away. You're not using that person. There's no individual check before it goes into SharePoint. So what you need to do is you have to consider who's going to be using this API. In this instance, we're going to be configuring something that is going to use a very specific URL. We're not our very specific site. We're not going to configure it to use all. It's just going to be very specific. So you do need to consider the security implications. A custom connector is something that is native within the Power Platform. You do need to move it. If you're going to move from one environment to the other, you do need to move that custom connector. You are limited by your overall scope. You only have about a megabyte of Swagger file. That is going to change here very, very soon. But right now it is only 1 megabyte. You have lots of import options. You can use Postman, you can Swagger, you can do direct import like we'll do. But there are lots of different options here for you to use. And then, of course, there is the direct HTTP connector call. This is local to your application, and you do have to handle all the responses and the responses and the requests all within that application. So you do need to know how to deal with some JSON. All right. So we are going to use the custom connector. And the first thing we need to do is to get into Azure AD and actually create the service principal. So let's get on that. So here we are in Entra ID, and I am creating an application. You can see I've got it named here, Graph API, SharePoint, site selected. I'm only going to use an organization such as SparkHound for right now. I am going to say this is going to be a web platform, and for the time being, I'm just going to put in localhost. Okay, let's register that. All right, so we've got this created, and you can see we've got some endpoints where we can connect this into. This is going to become very important here in just a second. Next, what I'll do, I'm going into the API permissions, and I'm going to add a permission that we need to use here. I'm going to use the Graph API, and I'm going to go in application permissions because my application is going to run as a background service. I don't want to have a user associated with this. So, and I will need to use some sort of administrative consent in order to make this happen. So do keep that in mind. We'll go to sites. And once I get to sites, I'm going to select this one right here, sites.selected. And what that's going to allow me to do is to be granular on what I'm granting, this permission that I'm granting. I don't want to use all. It is really kind of a big security hole to have an application ID that can connect to all of your websites and do everything you want to do to those, anything you can do to those websites. So we have sites.selected here. So that's what I'm going to use. I'll add this permission, and you will notice that it is not granted for Spark Count. I do need to have an admin go ahead and clear this for me to grant admin consent. All right, I'm not an admin, so I'll need to contact my IT for that. That is going to be pretty much it. What I'll do now is I'll go into the secrets and I'll create a new secret. And the description here is going to be something like SharePoint secret, and I'll keep it for 6 months. You can make it custom, 24 months, whatever. 6 months is pretty good. What this means is you will have to either renew this secret or get a new one at the end of that 6 months. All right, I'll go ahead and generate this now, and I'm going to save this secret. As soon as I have it, I am going to save it, and I'll keep it for my use later on. All right. Let me pause my recording. I'll go ahead and create that. So I created my secret, and here is the client ID that I need. So I'll copy that to the clipboard. I'll need this anytime that I am calling this particular application. So when we will use this here in just a little bit when we're creating the authentication setup that will connect this particular service principal with our SharePoint site. The next part of our steps here is we need to grant permissions for this particular app for the SharePoint site. So what I have done here is I have connected into my contract demo site using the PNP SharePoint PowerShell. And what I've done here, the next command here is going to grant the full control permissions to the app ID that I just created with the display name of the application that we have. So if I hit enter here, that will go ahead and process, and what we'll get back is going to be something that looks a lot like this. So it says we have full control. This is the app site selected, and that is the app name. So that is our permission ID. So we're good to go here. I'm ready to begin looking at the Graph API calls that I need to make for my typical use in a flow. You're going to have usually a get list item, and you're also going to have a create item. So let's take a look at these. I'll need a site ID and I'll need a list ID for my get list items. And for create items, what I'll need is a site ID and a list ID. So what I'm going to do is I'll create these as I'll parameterize these so that I can pass them in my flow. The next thing I want to look at is my request. For the get, it's pretty self-explanatory. There really is no request. It's just that. I just want to, the thing I do have to do though is I do want to expand the fields. This allows me to get back all the information from my metadata. My create item, however, is going to have some specific things that I need. So I do need the fields, and then I'm going to need what the fields are that I'm updating. For this, what we'll do is we'll just create a blank area here. So we'll ask for what the field is, and then we'll add these in when we're doing our flow. That way it genericizes it, and we'll have the ability to kind of use this in multiple different areas. The get item, the next thing here with the get item is you're going to get a response with all these fields. So we will create a response object with a fields property, so that we can grab this information directly from our machine. Okay, now the fun stuff. I am ready to create my custom connector, and I've given it a name here of Graph SB Site Selected to give myself some idea of what it's for and where it comes from. The problem here is that you do have a character restriction here, so you can't make it as long as you want. Anyway, let's continue here and let's get going. All right, so here we have the basic general information screen. You can give it an icon if you want, a different background color, anything that you really want to do here. For my host, I'm going to say it's Microsoft.com. My base URL is just going to be that. For security, now we're going to get into some of the interesting stuff. So for authentication, I'm going to call my auth 2.0, and then my identity provider is actually going to be Active Directory. And this gives me all the stuff that I need. I'm going to check the box for enable service principal support. My client ID is going to be the ID that we created. So that came that is, if we go to the Graph API here, that is the client ID right here. Okay, so that gets put right there, the client secret. I have this blocked off so no one can see my secret. We're going to go in here, we'll put it that. You can click that to see it, but I'm not going to do that. The organizational URL, we're going to keep the same. The authorization URL will keep the same. Tenant ID will keep the same. The resource URL, however, is going to be something interesting. This is going to be https graph.microsoft.com. So we're going to use that same one as our calling resource for this. Scope is going to remain scope. Now, what's really interesting here is this redirect URL. That is going to be something that we will place into our service principal here in just a second. So what we'll do here is I'm going to say create connector and get rid of that. And it's going to save this here, and it'll create essentially a generic blank connector for me, because I haven't done anything with the definition yet. But after this is done saving and it has been successfully created, and we'll come back down here. Here is this redirect URL. Okay, this is what we're going to grab. We're going to grab that, and then I'll go to my Azure AD app, and I'm going to go into this area right here where it says redirect URIs, and I've got one web here. So I'm going to click on that, and instead of localhost, because it's not really going back to my own computer, and localhost isn't something that's set out for the internet, I'm going to put that URI that I got. I'll go ahead and save this, and now I'm ready to go. So what this redirect does is, once authentication is asked for, where does it return? So this actually sends something to Entra ID. Entra ID does its thing, and then it redirects back to the next place. It redirects back to the URL that you tell it. And this is the URL that we want to go to, because we want it to go back to my custom connector. All right, so this is all done. So now we're going to move forward into the definition. And the definition here, we're going to have a couple of actions. My action here is going to be get list items. You can have whatever description you want, but your operation ID is what's going to be important. And I want to say get list items. Okay. That begins here. My visibility, don't really worry about that just yet. My request here now is where I'm going to import from a sample. So if we go to Graph API, we go to the Graph API documentation, and for get item, you can see this is going to be our URL. I'm going to copy that, and we'll put that into our URL area here. Now, what I'll do here, you see here, we've got site ID, and we've got list ID. Those things are hidden, all right? And I'm just going to say items, and I'm going to expand fields, because this is going to be get, we'll say this is get all items, okay? My header here is, we can go ahead and use just the generic stuff here, and it's going to accept everything that we want there. There is no body on the get, so we'll make sure our verb is get, and that's all there is to it. Now, when I click import, what you'll see here is immediately we see the path of site ID and list ID are populated. So if we go in here, you can see here I have no default value, but it is required. Okay. So that means I can get virtually any list or list in whatever site that I want. My query here has expand, and the body is just going to be empty. For the response, I'm going to create something new. So I'm going to say import this from my sample, and I'll go over into the response that I get here. We're going to copy this, and we'll go ahead and paste that into here. And essentially what that does is says, I'm going to get an ID, I'm going to get some fields, and then I'm going to get some information within those fields. So we'll go ahead and import that. Okay, so now you see color and name, quantity, and ID. That's not always going to be the same, so let's get rid of this stuff. So let's go into Swagger, and what we'll do is we come down into that particular area that we're defining this as. So here's our path, there's our IDs, and then we're going to have our default response. And so you can see here is description, type, object, screen. We're going to get a type back. We're going to have properties. Here's our fields, type, object, properties. I'm just going to keep this empty. Okay. And that'll be that. Put in something like that for that. All right, so we've got properties here, and we'll just get rid of those properties. So we know we're going to get an object back, and it's going to be of a description field. So there we go. That's what we got. From on now, what we'll do is we're going to move into back into our definition. All right, so now we've got this all set, and let's go into our next action. Our next action is going to be something like a create items, and our operational ID is going to be create. Let's say create list item. All right, now play the same game as we did before. We're going to go into our request, and I'll go into my create item here, and I'll grab that URL that I'm looking for. And it's going to be the same thing. So this one I'll paste in there, and we're going to do this one is going to be a post. And so my body here is going to simply be something that looks like this. And we'll have fields and then nothing. So that's not a valid JSON. And what we do need, because we are going to have fields in here, and it's going to be multiple things here, we need to say that this is an object. So we'll put some curly braces there. We'll import that, and we are good to go. So the next thing here is we do want something that's going to be a response. So again, we go back into this, and we are going to say that our body of the response is going to look like, let's just go back there. Our body of the response, we're going to import from a sample. We'll go back into our graph API here, and what does the response look like? Response is going to look something like this. And again, this is directly what it's going to look like. So we can paste that in here, and now we're going to be ready for what is going to come back for us. So this is it. We are ready to go. Let's update the connector. All right, our connector is updated and we are ready to create a connection. Now, creating the connection is going to be a little bit different than what we're used to. All right, so our authentication type we're going to choose here is going to be service principal. We don't want an OAuth. We don't want to connect it to any individual. We want to connect it to itself. So again, we have our client ID. So I'll grab that client ID that we had. So here's our client ID. Same one as we had before. We're going to grab a client secret. And now after we grab the secret, it's going to be something new. We have a tenant. Where is the tenant? Where that is right here. It's our directory ID, our tenant ID. Let's copy that and let's go back here and we're going to paste that here. So we're going to create a connection. All right. What this does is it uses a service principal. And we have this because if you remember back in security, we checked a box for that very thing. So we're going to hit refresh here, and you can see here's the connection. So it's graph SP sites collected, created this. All right, we're going to use a site ID, and I'm going to grab that from my handy dandy list here. And then a list ID, and I'll grab that there. And of course, we are expanding our fields, FIELDS. And let's test that operation. We get back a 200 response, and we can see here's our body with all the information that we are looking for. So here's all my stuff. I've got a title and some link and all kinds of fields that are responded there. All right, so that is good to go. And now let's go ahead and create an item, and we're going to do the same kind of thing. I'll grab I already have that list ID in there. So let's grab the site ID once again. And let's try this. So we're going to have some raw body here. It says fields. So we're going to turn this on, and let's see if we can make something happen here. So you know what? I have this in a postman here somewhere. So let me grab that. Just one second. So here is my create item, and my body is this guy right here. So let's paste that in there. Okay, and let's give this a shot. This thing is awesome. Test operation, and we get a 201. We did create it, and look at that. So we are good to go with our operations. We've got it tested. Our authentication is working correctly. So now we can go ahead and set up our flow that uses no individual's ID. It's going to use all service principals. All right, so that's what we are going to get into next. So here we go in our Power Automate, and I just created a very simple application here, a very simple flow that has a reoccurrence. I've got it set for 1 month. We'll adjust that here in just a second. And then I have a compose action. The compose action looks very similar to the inputs that we had in our custom connector. So here we have the title, we've got the lookups, type is service agreement, and we have some sort of contract need here. So what I did here is I've added here, you can add a connection that's going to create a list item, and this goes and connects to our custom connector. And so what that looks like is I just go here to add an action. I'm going to select my runtime. The runtime is going to be custom, and here it is. My my Azure open my custom connector here, my graph SPS site selected. So here I have a create, and I've got a list. And so what I've done here is I have my create item done here. So we're going to get list items here. And so I have a site ID, and I've got my list ID. You can see here I have some what I need to expand. All right, I'm going to expand the fields, FIELDS. And what I'll do here, I'm going to use the same site ID, and this is a GUID that you can get from your from your site. So I'm going to do site ID here, and then I have my list ID here, and there we go. So what this is going to do now is I've got a reoccurrence. It's going to happen a couple of times, or it's going to happen once a month. I've got it set for it. And then I have my compose. This creates the body statement that I wanted. For my get list items, all I need is simply the site ID and the list ID. That's something we defined in our custom controller, and we're going to expand the fields property. For my create list ID, what I have is a site ID, I have a list ID, and then I have the body / fields. So this is that body field that we created, and then / fields. This is the proper JSON, and then I have the output of my compose action that sends it into that. All right, so let's go ahead and save, and let's test this guy after it gets done saving, and we will show how this works. Now, right now, the owner of this this flow is me. This is my user. We will get into how do we switch that over into a service principal here in just a little bit. But for now, this is how it works. So we're going to test this, and I'm just going to manually test this, and we just say run flow, and it's going to go ahead and kick off for us. So once that gets done, all right, so we see we have the recurrence, we have our compose action is done. We do get our list items back. See, that is green. So we'll go in here and we'll take a look at our input parameters. Here's our input parameters. There's the site ID and the list ID. We got a 200 back. And here's the JSON that we're looking for. There's our cache, and here's our body. Now we got a whole bunch of stuff in here because those are all the fields that we got back from our list. Okay, and then we created a list item. Again, this is going to be properties here. This is what we sent it. It succeeded, and we've got it set up there. So that is what this looks like. All right, so we're making these HTTP calls back to the Graph API and getting information back, and we're just using that connection that's using our service principal to do this. There's no interaction between me, the user, and the lists. What I want to demonstrate here, this is the site where I've created that item in it. And you can see here, here's that service agreement. This matches all of our stuff here. I've got my lookup columns. I've got the client and also my requested person in here. What is important here is created by. And you can see these are created by, they're created by me, and they're created associated to my user. But you see here, SharePoint app. This is what I use to create that particular line, not associated with my user. So it is the SharePoint app that's actually going out, that service principal that we created that goes out, looks at all these information, all these line items, and then created this particular one based upon the information that we gave it. And this is how we know that it's working correctly, because this SharePoint app, that is not me, that is not my user, it is the service principal. Okay, so now what we want to show here is how do we then make sure that our flow is owned by the service principal and not me individually. So we'll get into that now. So I went to the admin center and I selected my environment. I am the administrator of this environment, so I can do pretty much whatever I want inside here. You do need to be an environment administrator to add an app user. So what I need to do is create an S2S app. So I'm going to say see all here. This takes me here. And you can see I've got a couple of these service principals created already. They have hashtags next to them. I'm going to say create new app user. I'm going to go add an app, and then I'm going to paste in there the name of the app that we've created. So there is from our beginning Graph API SharePoint site selected. So we're going to collect this one, and we're going to go add. All right, so here I'm going to select my business unit. My business unit is going to be, of course, the business unit associated with this particular environment. And now I need to give it security roles, just like any other user. So I'll go edit here, and the roles I want to do here is for this particular one. I need it to act as a user, but I'm going to give it some basic stuff here. So I'm going to give it a basic user. I am also going to give it an environment maker role, and I'm also going to make sure that it has ability to get to Dataverse for other things that I want to do. Remember, this is the stuff that I want it to do inside my environment. So I can make this it's going to be a system customizer. All right, so there's system customizer. You can make it system administrator, but I think that's going a little too far. So this gives me rights to have this application, be able to develop and do some other things. It's got quite a bit of rights inside of this application. Right now, I don't have any Dataverse tables, but if I did, it could then access them. So we're going to save that. And then we're going to create that. And then what that looks like here, it's going to come into my application users here using a hashtag in front of it, just like these other ones. So there we go. It's in there, selected as this. So now what I need to do is I need to set this as a user. So what I do with that is I'm going to go back into my, this is my contract demo. I'm going to go back into my flows here. And what I'll do is I'm going to set the owner here. Now, one little gotcha. If I try to come in here and put that particular user, it's going to fail. So what I have to do is I have to go into the details right here, details, edit. This is going to come up here, and then it's going to have an owner. Now I can't set the owner to someone outside, and this is actually a non-solution flow. I actually have to be part of the solution in order to change the owner. I'll do that here in just a second. But what I can't do is go here and in here. This service principal can't be a co-owner. So you'll see here that graph API selected. Say it's not part of my organizational direction. Even if I add the hashtag in front of it, it's just not going to find it. Okay, so that's kind of a gotcha that pops up. So I'll go ahead and add this as a solution. Let's go to create a new solution, or maybe I've got one here that I can help with. I don't see anything else that's going to help me here. So let's go new solution, and we'll call the service principal SharePoint solution. I'll select the publisher. I'm just going to use my default publisher, and here we go, version 1. Let's create it. And it's fairly simple to add things to this. The trigger that I have is a timed trigger. That means it can be added to a solution from the existing. Some of these can't. If you have some of the instant triggers and things like that, it won't allow you to add here to this. But let's go add existing. We're going to go to automation. This is a cloud flow. It's going to be outside Dataverse, and it is named timed trigger flow. I believe I think so. Yep. Let's go add there. And it's going to add it then to my solution. Once it adds it to my solution, I can go back into it there and update the owner. So we'll wait for this to happen. All right, refresh. Okay, so there we go. It is now part of our flows. There it is, time trigger flow. All right, so let's go in there and let's edit this guy. And this is going to go right into my design surface. But what we want to do is we're going to go back. And now we should be able to go in here and update my owner. See, so now I can update my owner. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of that because there can only be one owner at a time. And now I'm going to paste in my graph, and you can see it right there as my graph API. So here we go. This is now, as I save this, and it's going to say, you really want to do this. I'm going to change the owner. And now this flow is fully owned by users now, by users outside of the actual user people. These are user principals that both own and activate and run this particular flow. So that is how we set this up, and that's how you create a flow that first uses the Graph API using a user principal, so that back and forth stuff through SharePoint is all based on the Graph API. There are no user interactions. It writes and reads directly from as that user principal, and now is owned. So if I were to leave the company and I were to leave as an owner, you do need kind of have an admin to take care of this, but You can see here, it is the owner of this particular system. I am still a co-owner, but I can go ahead and leave. My user can be disabled, and this flow will still run because it is the service principal that both owns it and owns the information behind it. Okay, hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully it helped you out, and I will see you